Unit 4, Agriculture, the last unit of Trimester 1, Regular Human Geography. Content Objectives 4.1, Explain the historical evolution of agriculture. Content Objective 4.2, Describe the current practices of commercial agriculture. As we look at agriculture, keep in mind that half of the people in less developed countries today are in their primary economic sector. Remember that primary economic sector is extracting resources from earth. And when we compare to MDCs, less than 2% of farmers located in the United States. This chapter or this unit is going to focus on the primary economic sector and the activity. And when we talk about the origins, agriculture cannot be documented with certainty because some of it comes before recorded history. Your ICANN statements explain the early hearths to the origin of agriculture and compare and contrast commercial and subsistent agriculture. When we look at early humans, when we go back to the first agricultural revolution, also referred to as the Neolithic agricultural revolution, most people were hunters and gatherers prior to 10,000 before Common Era. There were environmental factors and cultural factors. 10,000 before Common Era was the last ice age, and so oceans began to diminish and land began to form natural irrigation, which made it easier to cultivate crops. Domestication happens in 4 hearths. The first hearth for both vegetative and crop plantations happens in the Southwest with staple crops of barley and wheat. And then in East Asia, we have rice and Malay. In Central Africa, rice. And then Latin America, potatoes, beans, and cotton and maize, which is also corn. Hunters and gatherers, again, would have been in stage 1 of the DTM. So we know that there's a lot of ebb and flow with the crude birth rate and crude death rate, but not growth and natural increase rate. This shows us the 4 primary hearths, but with the addition of Southeast Asia as another potential hearth that predates recorded history. Here shows you some of the crops that were found in the 4 or 5 hearths. When we look at livestock domestication, the origin is Southwest Asia again, same as the crops. And there we see sheep, goat, pig, and dog. And then we notice that with the domestication of animals, most animals that we now see as livestock in the U.S. were brought here from abroad. A lot of the movement to the west happened through the Columbia Exchange. As you see here, we see the primary exports from Western Africa to parts of northern South America. Then in exchange, crops that were native of North America were brought to Europe, specifically Western Europe. And as the Columbia Exchange began to grow and the demand for crops began to grow, specifically cotton, we see slaves that came across in the slave triangle from Western Africa to South America and to Central America and to the 13 colonies, which will later be United States. How does agriculture vary? Well, subsistence farming is located in less developed countries. As I mentioned to start the notes, 50% are farmers in LDCs, and those are subsistent, meaning they produce for food on the farm for family consumption. They do not sell for profit. Commercial agriculture sells for profit. They don't consume the food on the farm. And commercial farming also uses high technology, has large farm plots. Subsistence has small farm plots, and oftentimes they use animate or hand tools for cultivation. Moving on to content objective 2. Describe the current practices of commercial agriculture. And your ICANN statements explain the global distribution of commercial agriculture. Explain the key characteristics of MDC agricultural practices. And some of those practices are listed A through F below. All right, and we can see that through this choropleth map there, where shifting cultivation, which is a practice of less developed countries, is the largest concentration. Over 20% of land is allocated to shifting cultivation. And then we see intensive subsistent, meaning that they use the land very intensively, meaning a lot of hand labor, and it's a high arithmetic density of their farming practices. And there's wet rice non-dominant in latitudes where you cannot grow rice, and their staple crop would be wheat. And then you have pastoral nomadism, which consumes, which is concentrated in desert regions of the world, like the largest being the Saharan Desert. But we also have the Arabian or Aruba Kali Desert, and then the Gobi and the Taklamakan Desert in East Asia, and that's where we see pastoral nomadism, and that takes up about 15% of all land area, and it's the fastest declining LDC practice. And then we have commercial farming. Mixed crop and livestock is the most common farming in United States. It provides food. Well, we produce crops, BTU crops, for the animals to feed the livestock, and then livestock is butchered and then sent to markets. And then dairy farming, and dairy farming has shifted from MDCs to LDCs, with the largest dairy farmer being India. And we see livestock ranching, and ranching is found primarily in the West and also down in South America, in parts of Brazil and Argentina. And then Mediterranean, found only in very specific areas of the world, obviously around the Mediterranean Sea, but also the Pacific Southwest of the United States, and then along the southern tip of South Africa, and then the west coast of Chile in South America. And commercial gardening, we can see, is found, most commercial gardening in the U.S. is found in the southeast. All right. Central U.S. and Europe, we have a lot of crop and livestock, so we use those crops, as I mentioned, usually BTU corn or possibly soybeans that feeds the livestock. They will rotate the crops to maintain fertility, and they will also sell the animal products for human consumption. It benefits, you have a stable income year long, and then also provides year-long work. We can see grain or corn. This is known as the Corn Belt, where we see all these dots. We can see food consumption, and when we look at total selected commodities, we've seen it grow in total dry weight consumption. Soybeans, again, are found. We can see in Minnesota, they're found in the west and southern region of the U.S. A lot of soybeans, again, found near the Corn Belt. And then pigs and hogs. The largest pig manufacturing is actually in North Carolina, as we can see with this high arithmetic density. And turkeys, found in central Minnesota and also North Carolina and parts of South Carolina and down in Missouri and Arkansas. Dairy farming. Dairy farmings have shifted from MDCs to LDCs because of cheap labor, and also it's very intensive, meaning it's very costly for the technology, and also the milk shed, which is the distance to keep milk so it's perishable. And again, the challenges are year-long production and the high cost to feed the animals, and then the fluctuating milk prices. Several reasons why they've shifted to LDCs. Again, we can see pasteurized cheese, pasteurized milk in Wisconsin. A lot of our milk production historically was in the Northeast, and we see milk production in the San Joaquin Valley of California. See global milk production. Grain farming. This is solely consumed by humans. We have a lot of grains in a lot of our foods. I encourage you to look at the food you consume, especially carbohydrates or those in boxes, and you can see some form of grain is in there, whether it be corn, oats, barley, rice, or millet. Most likely it's going to be wheat. Crops, wheat is the number one exported crop, the largest global exchanged crop. And we have grain production. The winter wheat is found in the winter seasons in Kansas, Colorado, and Oklahoma. Then in the spring season in the Dakotas and Montana, and then also the Paulus region of Washington. And that shows you the regions for wheat, now barley, and oats. Livestock ranching. Ranching grew after the 1860s with the invention of the barbed wire and decline in the 1880s. So about 20 years is about how long was the peak of ranching in cowboys in the U.S. They'd created cattle towns through the cattle runs in Abilene, Dodge City, and Chicago. Chicago has some of the largest grain and livestock exchanges in the world. Conflict grew from range land in the West, so grew from the Homestead Act, people moving west, and now we learned in population, the population center continues to move west and south. Grazing land has declined because of commercial ranching has been replaced by commercial feedlots, so more densely concentrated livestock productions. And this shows you the more densely or higher arithmetic livestock productions. Mediterranean, as I already noted, it has to be in a specific climate, whereas Mediterranean, so it's found in very few areas of the world. They have to have mild winters, they have to have hot and dry summers. It's grown for human consumption. They grow more than just wine. They grow fruits, vegetables, tree crops such as figs, grapes, olives, dates, and citrus fruit. And again, it's sold for a profit as a commercial agriculture, MDC production. Look at grapes. You can see plums, and then tropical fruit such as lemons, wine production, and then commercial farming. It's also known as truck farming, most commonly found in the southeast. They have a long growing season. They're close to emerging markets. Their common crops are horticulture, and the horticulture products are apples, cherries, lettuce, tomatoes. Most are sold to agribusinesses, so large conglomerate food producers, processors, and distributors. Machines are used in a lot of these production, with hand labor being migrant workers. Okay, we can see orchards, peaches, oranges, tomatoes, cranberries, and the tree shaker for apples. So the mechanization shows you the agriculture regions of the U.S.